Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Aneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. United States Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has assured Afghan President Ashraf Ghani of a continued $3.3 billion in annual aid even after the U.S. troops leave the country. Khalilzad's visit to Kabul comes as fighting between the Taliban and Afghan forces rages across the war-torn country. Earlier in the day, the Taliban claimed killing dozens of security personnel in a car bomb attack on a police headquarters in the Balkh province, but police said 2 soldiers were killed and 15 others were wounded in the attack. Israeli police have detained Palestinian twins who have become the face of a campaign against forced expulsions of Palestinians in the occupied East Jerusalem. Supporters of Muna and Mohammed al-Quds say their detention is part of Israeli efforts to halt opposition to evictions in Sheikh Jarrah. In Sri Lanka, at least 16 people have died and nearly 250,000 affected in flash floods and mudslides triggered by heavy rains. Rains have been pounding the island nation since Thursday night and many houses and roads have been inundated. India has reported over 114,000 new coronavirus infections overnight, the lowest in 2 months. The country has recorded nearly 2,700 deaths in the past 24 hours. Here in Pakistan, which has registered 76 deaths and more than 1,600 COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours. While globally the virus has claimed more than 3.7 million lives and infected over 172 million people. And in tennis, former world #1 Roger Federer has withdrawn from the French Open due to knee problems. He was scheduled to play Matteo Berrettini in the last 16. Meanwhile, Stefano Tsitsipas beat Pablo Carreño Busta in straight sets to reach the last 8. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. U.S. Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has assured Afghan President Ashraf Ghani of a continued $3.3 billion in annual aid even after the U.S. troops leave the country. Khalilzad's visit to Kabul comes as fighting between the Taliban and Afghan forces rages across the war-torn country. Earlier in the day, the Taliban claimed killing dozens of security personnel in a car bomb attack on a police headquarters in Balkh province. But police said 2 soldiers were killed and 15 others wounded in the attack. On Saturday, the group claimed to have captured several districts as fighting rages amid withdrawal of foreign troops from the country. A UN report warned that the group has tightened its grip on power. It said the Taliban now exercise direct control over half of the country's district administrative centers. Israeli police have detained Palestinian activist Muna al-Quds from her home in occupied East Jerusalem. She has been campaigning to stop forced expulsions of Palestinians from the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. Palestinian state media said Muna's brother has also been arrested. In recent months, the neighborhood has seen a series of sit-ins by Palestinians protesting against the forceful expulsions of families from their homes. Rights groups say up to 1,000 Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah and the nearby Silvan district face being forcefully displaced. Muna's detention comes the day after an Al Jazeera journalist, Jawar Baderi, was briefly arrested while covering a demonstration in the same area. Now, in Iraq, military says U.S. air defenders have shot down 2 drones at the country's Ain al-Assad air base that hosts American forces. It comes hours after the coalition forces said a U.S.-run diplomatic facility in the Iraqi capital Baghdad was targeted with a rocket strike. In a tweet, Coalition Forces spokesperson in Iraq, Colonel Wayne Maroto, said the rocket impacted near Baghdad Diplomatic Support Center. He said the attack caused no injuries or damage. No group has claimed responsibility for both the attacks so far. In another development, Iraq and the US agreed on a redeployment plan of coalition's troops outside the war-torn country. Meanwhile, northern Iraq's regional officials said 3 people have been killed in an airstrike on a camp housing thousands of displaced people. Now, at least 17 people, including children, have been killed in a missile attack on a gas station in eastern Yemen's Marib province. Marib's governor said dozens of people have been wounded, blaming Houthis for the attack. He said several cars, including the ambulances that arrived to rush the injured to hospitals, also caught fire. The Houthis have not yet commented on the attack. Meanwhile, Saudi-led Arab coalition says it has intercepted a Houthi drone launched towards the southern city of Khamis Moshe. However, the rebel group claims to have hit intended targets at King Khalid air base in the city. Earlier, Houthi spokesperson said an Omani delegation has arrived in Yemeni capital Sana'a for peace talks. However, US Special Envoy for Yemen, Tim Landerking, slammed Houthis and accused them of failing to reach an urgently needed ceasefire. Meanwhile, Syrian army has killed 70 militants after they attacked the government forces near Rivahia in Idlib province. The Russian Center for Reconciliation in Syria said 1 soldier was killed in the militant group's attack. It said 2 of the Syrian troops were also injured as they returned fire. The center also reported 39 episodes of shelling in the Idlib de-escalation zone by a militant group. Now moving to Sri Lanka, where at least 16 people have died while thousands have been displaced in the flash floods and the landslides triggered by heavy rains. More than 15,000 are seeking refuge in relief centres. The military is delivering food to people whose homes were waist deep with water, while Navy boats are rescuing marooned residents. Sri Lanka's southern and western plains were the most affected by the monsoon rains in the last 72 hours. The rain increased water levels in irrigation and hydroelectricity reservoirs. Authorities released the excess water into rivers, which caused water levels to rise and overflow into low-lying areas. Now, India has reported over 114,000 new coronavirus infections overnight, the lowest in 2 months. The country has recorded nearly 2,700 deaths in the past 24 hours, while globally the virus has claimed more than 3.7 million lives and infected over 172 million people. More about the pandemic in this report.
At the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, Europe was battered as hard as any other continent. However, the region has fared well in its vaccination drive. Italy, which was the first European state to face the huge consequences of the pandemic, has administered record vaccinations in 1 day. Belgium has announced to begin vaccinating 16 to 17-year-olds against COVID-19 from the next month. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson called on G7 to make a commitment to vaccinate the entire world against COVID-19 by the end of 2022. Over in the US, the country has so far registered more than 33 million coronavirus cases, while its death toll is approaching 600,000. The US authorities have announced to keep the foreign tourists away from beaches on the D-Day anniversary.
The hotel has been closed since March 1st last year. So we are reopening mid-June for a few clients who are attempting to cross the Atlantic, because as of June 9, the borders will be reopening a bit. But these are people who don't know how to organize at the last minute. So if they're told that they can start traveling again from June 9, they won't all be arriving suddenly in June. So we'll have a few ones coming, but they're really an exception.
Meanwhile, the US will donate 750,000 COVID-19 vaccine doses to Taiwan, offering a much-needed boost to the island's fight against the pandemic. Ministers from the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Trade Group have also agreed to speed up the transit of COVID-19 vaccines and related goods at ports. In Australia, contact tracers in Victoria are trying to find the source of 2 COVID-19 cases which have been highly infectious in the community.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 76 people have lost their lives to coronavirus over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the countrywide death toll has surged to 21,265. The ministry has logged more than 1,600 cases overnight. The number of confirmed cases has topped 932,000. Just over 3,400 people are in intensive care units. A total of 8.2 million vaccines have been administered in Pakistan as well. Now, at least 7 people are wounded in a blast in Pulwama district of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Security officials said the blast occurred at a busy bus stand. Police have launched an investigation into the incident. The wounded were taken to a hospital and their condition is said to be stable. In India, hundreds of farmers have continued their protests outside a police station in Haryana against police raids. This comes after the authorities arrested 3 of their colleagues and a politician abused the farmers. Protesting farmers demanded an apology from Devendra Singh Babli, whose political party is allied with the ruling BJP. Earlier, 2 FIRs had also been registered against the protesters over the clashes. For over 6 months, farmers have been protesting against new agricultural laws, which they say will destroy their livelihoods. However, the Narendra Modi-led government claims that the new laws will modernize India's agriculture. Now, candidates in Iran's presidential election have traded strong barbs in a live debate, accusing each other of treason or a lack of education. The presidential debate for the June 18 elections was focused on policies to run an economy devastated by 3 years of U.S. sanctions. The candidates offered 2 divergent visions on how the country should be run. The 5 hardline candidates attacked the 8-year performance of outgoing pragmatist President Hassan Rouhani, while the leading moderate candidate, former central bank chief Abdul Nasir Hemati, blamed hardliners for heightened tensions with the West. Now, in Burkina Faso, the number of people killed in a gun attack on a village has risen to 160, including 7 children. The United Nations has condemned the attack and called on countries to step up the fight against extremism. Authorities say armed assailants attacked the Solhan village in the Yagha province, which borders Niger. A government spokesman said another 40 residents were wounded, while the gunmen also burned homes and a market. President Roch Marc Christian Kabore urged national unity and called the killings barbaric. He has also announced 3 days of national mourning. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. In Nigeria now, at least 88 people have been killed in an attack by armed bandits in rest of Kebbi State. Police spokesman in the region said unidentified gunmen conducted attacks in 8 areas of the region. He said security forces were dispatched to the region and investigations were launched. Meanwhile, Nigeria's media said armed bandits attacked a vigilante group which was created to assist the security agencies to secure the volatile area. In April, 9 police officers were killed in an attack by gunmen in the state. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, in Greece, at least 2 people have been killed near a hotel on the resort island of Corfu. A police officer in Athens said the shooter also killed himself following the incident. State media said a 60-year-old local man had killed 2 of his neighbors over a private dispute. No injuries have been reported among the other hotel residents. Now, the residents of Venice have protested against the visit of the first cruise ship since the easing of coronavirus from the city port. The protesters called on the government of Venice to act on its earlier agreed ban to big vessels. The protesters rallied on land and on small boats, fluttering flags saying no big ships against the entry of large vessels into Venice. They said large vessels and ships cause great environmental hazards of pollution and underwater erosion of the city's foundations.
The thing is, we are still here because in spite of this decree, the cruise ship, these giant cruise ships are still gonna cross the Giudecca Channel. The reason we are here is because we are citizens of Venice and we are against this passage, but we are also against some type of like a tourism model that is destroying the city and is pushing out residents and people that want to live here.
Now in Germany, voting has started in the eastern state of Saxony and Hals in the last test of public opinion before September's national election. The polls could deal a blow to Conservative Armin Laschet's hopes of succeeding Chancellor Angela Merkel. Merkel's centre-right Christian Democratic Union won the last election 5 years ago. Incumbent Governor Rainer Haseloff, a member of the CDU, is popular with the voters in the state. But recent opinion polls show the CDU faces a strong challenge from the far-right AfD party, which came second in 2016. Merkel, who has been in power since 2005, is stepping down after the federal elections in September. Now, Peru is set to elect a new president today in an election that has bitterly divided the country by class and geography. Urban and higher-income citizens are preferring right-wing Keiko Fujimori, while the rural poor support leftist Pedro Castillo. Polls in the runoff election will open early in the day in most of the country's 11,700 voting centres. The official results will start pouring by day end. Opinion polls show a tight race to the presidency, but with Fujimori, who earlier trailed Castillo, pulling slightly ahead. Fujimori is promising to maintain Peru's economic stability and pro-free market policies, while Castillo has vowed to alter multinational firms' tax regimes and wants to rewrite the country's constitution. The butcher of Bosnia, former Serb military chief Ratko Mladic, will hear the decision today on his appeal against his genocide conviction in the Bosnian War. Mladic will hear the Hague Tribunal's fire verdict on the 1995 Srebrenica massacre, in which 100,000 were killed and 2.2 million displaced. Prosecutors allege that he personally oversaw the massacre as a part of ethnic cleansing to drive out Muslims and Bosnians. He was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment in 2017 by the UN War Crime Tribunal for genocide. Footages from the time show him handling sweets to children and taking away women by bus while men were taken to a forest and killed. The Bosnian War, 1992 to 1995, is known to be the bloodiest war of Europe after World War II. Moving on, Turkey has vowed to defeat a plague of sea SNOT threatening the Sea of Marmara with a disaster management plan. Marine life is threatened after a semi-layer of the organic matter known as marine mucilage spread through the sea. Speaking from a research vessel, Environmental Minister Murat Kurum outlined a 3-year plan to protect the marine environment. The minister added that he would soon give details of the plan. Earlier, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan blamed untreated water from the cities for the outbreak. But scientists say climate change and pollution are behind the spread of the matter. Now, Belarus has responded to the EU's curve, saying Minsk has prepared a set of counter-sanctions against the bloc. Prime Minister Roman Kolochenko said the West will not introduce any more sanctions on Belarus now. Golovchenko said the damage to the Belarusian economy from the Western sanctions could amount to 2.9% of their GDP. He said as a response, the European Union will lose Belarusian market as Minsk will shift from European technology to Asian as an alternative. Meanwhile, Belarusian opposition leader Sviatlana Tishkonashkaya demanded the West to impose further sanctions against Minsk. She demanded that not only businesses but also individuals from the government should be hit by Western sanctions. The EU is expected to agree a smaller sanctions list on individuals and to entities as a quick response by June 21st. Now, NATO has expressed deep concerns over close cooperation between Russia and Belarus, as well as Russia and China. In an interview, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that NATO is watching the global developments very keenly. Stoltenberg said Belarus is becoming more and more dependent on Russia. He added NATO is ready to protect against aggression faced by any member or ally from either Belarus or Russia. Stoltenberg further said political and military ties between Russia and China are becoming increasingly close and a serious challenge for NATO. He added all these matters will be discussed in the upcoming NATO 2030 summit in Brussels under security threats to NATO. President Joe Biden says the United States does not see conflict with Russia. In an article for the Washington Post, Biden reiterated the United States' desire for a stable and predictable relationship with Moscow. He said the two countries can work together on issues like strategic stability and arms control. However, Biden added the U.S. will not hesitate to respond to Russia's potential harmful activities. Biden said he imposed meaningful consequences for behaviors that violate U.S. sovereignty, including electoral meddling. The U.S. president said he will underscore West's commitment to human rights during his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two leaders are set to meet in Geneva on the 16th of June. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has hinted his return to political stage, saying he is very much looking forward to 2024. He was addressing an enthusiastic audience at the North Carolina GOP convention dinner in Greenville. In his first major speech since he left office in January, Trump repeated his previous barbs at President Joe Biden and the Democrats. The Republican also took aim at U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci and China over the coronavirus pandemic. Trump vowed to help Republicans in 2022 congressional elections and endorsed Representative Ted Budd for a Senate seat in North Carolina.
And we just can't let it happen. We're going to win North Carolina's all-important U.S. Senate race. And we're going to lay the groundwork for making sure that Republicans once again carry the great state of North Carolina in a year that I look very much forward to, 2024.
The U.S. says it is ending a long-standing practice of secretly obtaining reporters' records during probes into classified information leaks. This comes after recent revelations that the Trump administration secretly obtained phone and email records from a number of journalists. The Justice Department said it has completed a review of pending compulsory requests from reporters in a leak investigation. In a statement, the department said it will not seek compulsory legal process to obtain source information from journalists. Meanwhile, the White House said issuing subpoenas for reporters' records is not consistent with the Biden administration's policy. Earlier, President Biden said he will not allow the Justice Department to seize the reporters' data, describing the practice as wrong. Mexicans are heading to the polls in one of the biggest elections in the country's history. The elections are being seen as a referendum on President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's policies. Mexico's election body said nearly 95 million people are eligible to vote. The lead-up to elections was marked by violence, with at least 89 politicians killed in over 200 days of campaign. Since taking the office in 2018, Obrador expanded the role of the state in the energy industry. A recent poll suggests his national regeneration movement may lose some of its 253 seats in the lower house. The results will set the course for the world's most populous Spanish-speaking country. Now, enthusiasts from all over Russia showed off their technological creativity by participating in a drone racing competition in Moscow. The participants created their own drones and made changes to the models right on site to improve their chances of winning. Their goal was to complete the track in shortest time possible. In 2017, drone racing attained the status of an official sport by the International Federation of Aeronautics. Following FAI's decision, drone racing was included in the All-Russian Register of Sports by the country's sports ministry in 2018. A SpaceX cargo ship has delivered fresh supplies to the International Space Station. These include a baby bobtail squid and near-microscopic 8-legged creatures called tardigrades. The Dragon Commercial Resupply Services cargo ship carrying these supplies autonomously docked with the space station. A reusable Falcon 9 rocket carried it out of Earth's atmosphere from the Kennedy Space Center. The resupply ship is an upgraded version that can carry more cargo than its predecessor. The squid will be used to observe symbiotic relationships between animals and microbes, while NASA sent some 2,000 tardigrades to see how they handle the stresses of microgravity. More news coming up after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back now. El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele says he will make the cryptocurrency Bitcoin a legal tender in the country. If his plan is backed by Congress, the country would be the first to formally adopt the digital currency. It would be used alongside the US dollar, which is El Salvador's official currency. In a series of tweets, Bukele said if even 1% of Bitcoin is invested in El Salvador, it would increase GDP by 25%. He added Bitcoin will make it easier for Salvadorans living abroad to send payments home. El Salvador's economy relies heavily on foreign remittances, which make up around 20% of the country's GDP. In sports now, let's start with tennis. Former world's #1 Roger Federer has withdrawn from the French Open due to knee problems. He was scheduled to play Italian 9th seed Matteo Berrettini in the last 16. Federer had 2 knee surgeries last year and played only 3 matches in 16 months before arriving in Paris. He had earlier said that he was focusing on next month's Wimbledon, where he has won a record 8 titles. Earlier, Greek star Stefanos Tsitsipas beat Pablo Carreño Busta in straight sets to reach the last 8. He will face the winner of the first round contest between Christian Garin and Daniil Medvedev. Now in the French Open, Anastasia has booked her place in the 5th round with a win over Victoria Azarenka. Former world's #1 Azarenka took the first set, but Azarenka came back strong to take the next 2. She will next face either 23-time Grand Slam champion Serena Williams or Elena Rybakina. Earlier, Tamara Zidansek became the first Slovenian woman to reach the quarterfinals of a Grand Slam with a win over Serena Castilla. The 23-year-old had never been beyond the second round at a Grand Slam before. In the last 8, Juliana will face Spain's Paula Badosa. In motorsports now, Mexican driver Sergio Perez has won the Azerbaijan Grand Prix for Red Bull. A tyre blowout denied his teammate Max Verstappen victory, while world champion Lewis Hamilton also failed to score. Verstappen was dominating the race when a late puncture caused him to crash with 5 laps to go. However, he kept his 4-point championship lead over Hamilton after he ran off the track at the restart. Sebastian Vettel finished second for Aston Martin, while Pierre Gasly ended in 3rd place for AlphaTauri. Now, boxing legend Floyd Mayweather and YouTube star Logan Paul are set to go head-to-head in an exhibition fight tomorrow. The fight will be held at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami.
Mayweather weighed in at the heaviest of his career, but was still 35 pounds lighter than the YouTuber on the eve of fight. Each fighter is set to pocket millions from the exhibition bout, having no judges or official winner. Mayweather said he expects to make $50 million, which will not count against his unblemished professional record. Widely considered as one of the greatest fighters of all times, he has never faced any loss during his professional career of 50 fights.
I've been here before, so I know what it takes. I fought every different style you could possibly fight. Height don't win fights, weight don't win fights. Fighting wins fights at the end of the day, and I can fight.
Meanwhile, his social media sensation opponent has an official record of 1 loss and 1 draw.
You don't know what to expect. And this is not the biggest fight of my life. This is the biggest fight of his life, because he's got a lot on the line and he got everything to lose. I'm gonna go in there and have fun.
Many among the community of combat athletes have termed the fight a disgrace to boxing.
And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the world. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.
मेरा नाम मुदस्सिर ज़िया है और मेरा ताल्लुक़ लाहौर से है।